I was in the middle of a crisis negotiation when my aunt called. 40 people in a boardroom, a company hemorrhaging reputation by the hour, me standing at the head of the table, 3 steps from closing the most complex case of my career. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Evelyn never called twice. I excused myself, stepped into the corridor, answered. "She's in the hospital," Evelyn said before I could speak. "It's serious. And Alina." A pause. "There's something else. Something you need to know before you decide anything. Can you come tonight?" I stood in that corridor for a long time after she hung up. The sister who had destroyed my life was in a hospital bed, and the same parents who had disowned me, blocked my number, returned my letters, acted as though I had ceased to exist, were, according to Evelyn, waiting for me to walk through a door I had closed 5 years ago. That wasn't even the strangest part. The strangest part was what Evelyn had found, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I tell you what happened in that hospital room, before I tell you what Selene did, what my parents said, what I found in those documents that changed everything, you need to understand what she took from me and how I built something better from the pieces. Before we continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment on the location from where you're watching. My name is Alina Moreau, and 5 years ago, I had everything. Not everything in the vague, ungrateful way people mean when they don't know what they have. I mean specifically, concretely, I can list it. A career I had clawed into existence from nothing, junior partner at one of the most respected crisis consultancy firms in the country. An apartment that was mine, paid for by work I was proud of. A family who showed up at my achievements with the particular warmth of people who understood what it had cost to get there. And Marcus, my best friend since university, sharp, funny, infuriating in the way of someone who is almost always right. The person I called before I had processed what I thought about something. Then Marcus got sick. The diagnosis arrived on a Tuesday. He called me himself, direct as always. "I need to tell you something." And he told me, and I sat very still on the other end of the line, and when he finished, I said, "What do you need?" "Company," he said. "Oh, mostly just company." I took leave from the firm that week. I moved into his spare room. I became, for the better part of a year, the person who was simply there, in the waiting rooms, in the bad nights, in the days when the treatment made him too sick to manage alone. I barely contacted my family, not from choice, from complete absorption. When you're holding someone else up, you don't have hands free for much else. I did not know that my sister had noticed the gap. I did not know she had already started building inside it. That was my mistake. Not leaving, not choosing Marcus. My mistake was believing that the people who loved me would wait, and not understanding that someone was already working, carefully and deliberately, to make sure they didn't. Let me tell you what Selene Moreau did. Not in the way I imagined it for 5 years. Vague, shapeless, the kind of betrayal you feel without being able to prove. I mean specifically, documented, with timestamps. She told my parents I had quit my job, not taken leave, quit, walked out, abandoned everything. She told them I was ashamed of the family, that I wasn't calling because I had moved on, moved up, decided that where I came from was beneath me. She sent my mother a message from a fake account, a mutual acquaintance, someone my mother trusted, claiming she had seen me at a social event, laughing. Fine, not occupied with anything serious. She sent my father an email in my name. I still don't know how she accessed my account, or whether she constructed something convincing enough that nobody questioned it. What I know is what it said. Cold, dismissive words about the family that I would not have written in my worst moment. Words calibrated perfectly to hit my father where he was most vulnerable, his pride, his sense of what he deserved from a daughter he had invested in. She did all of this in increments, patiently, over months. And here's the thing about my parents that Selene understood better than I ever gave her credit for. She knew exactly how they worked. She knew my father's pride would not allow him to question information once he had accepted it, because reconsidering would mean admitting he had been wrong. She knew my mother's love was enormous, and therefore enormously manipulable. That if you gave Helena Moreau a version of events that hurt her, she would protect herself by believing it completely. Celine knew all of that. She used all of it. And by the time I came up for air, by the time Marcus turned a corner and I looked at my phone and felt with cold dread the shape of what had happened, it was already done. My mother's number rang twice and went to voicemail, then once, then not at all. My father called once, one call, his voice like a door closing. "Don't contact your mother, we're finished." "Dad, listen to me. Your sister has been here," he said. "She's been here every day, you haven't." The line went dead. I sat in Marcus's apartment and understood that I had been removed, not left, removed. There is a difference, and it matters, and I would spend the next 5 years learning exactly how much. I tried everything: letters, emails, a visit to the house that ended with the door not being opened, or a message through a cousin asking for 15 minutes, just 15 minutes to explain. Nothing. Every attempt hit the same wall: smooth, complete, maintained. The kind of wall that requires upkeep. And I remember standing outside my parents' house one evening in the rain, looking at the lit windows and thinking, this is too complete. Grief doesn't build walls this clean. Someone is maintaining this. I couldn't prove it. I had nothing but the shape of the thing. Too total, too fast, too perfectly calibrated to my parents' specific weaknesses. But I knew. So I did the only thing I could do. I left and I built. The next 5 years I am going to give you quickly because the details are less important than what they produced. I went back to work. My partners had held my position through sheer professional grace. I came back quieter than I'd left and twice as effective. Grief does that when you refuse to let it stop you. I made full partner within 2 years, my name on the door, a reputation that preceded me into every room, the person you called when the building was on fire and you needed someone who wouldn't run. I moved into an apartment I chose myself, furnished by my own decisions, with no one's taste but mine, and Marcus recovered. Slowly, then completely. He started painting in his spare room, badly and joyfully, and met someone wonderful, and I was there for all of it. I was, by every external measure, more than fine. But here is the part I will be honest about. I carried it. Every day. The specific, quiet weight of losing people who are still alive. Of knowing there is a version of your family that exists. Dinners, Audi celebrations, ordinary Tuesdays, and you are not in it. I carried it. I did not put it down. I waited, without knowing what I was waiting for. Then Evelyn called. I drove to my aunt's house that evening and sat at her kitchen table, and she put a folder in front of me and said, "Read it, all of it, before I tell you anything." I read it. It took 40 minutes. What I found in those documents was not what I had imagined. I had imagined something, vague, shapeless, the confirmation of a feeling. What I found was a precise, detailed, time-stamped record of a campaign, the fabricated emails, the fake messages, a chain of correspondence between Celine and a woman I didn't recognize, discussing, openly, casually, how to manage the Alina situation, a phrase that appeared multiple times, and as if I were a problem she was project managing, as if 5 years of my life were a deliverable she had been working toward. I set the last page down. Evelyn watched me. "How long have you had this?" I asked. 3 weeks. I found it while gathering documents for her legal situation. I wanted to be certain before I called you. Her legal situation. She was CFO of an investment firm. There was an audit. Irregularities, significant ones. The kind that require someone who knows how to navigate a corporate crisis. Evelyn's voice was dry, precise. The kind of person who does this professionally. I looked at my aunt across the table. They want me to fix it. Your parents are desperate, and what you do, what you're known for, yes, you're exactly what this situation requires. She paused. I won't dress it up. Did she ask for me specifically? Your father did. He doesn't know what I know. He just knows you're the best. A beat. I called you because I needed you to walk into that room with your eyes open. Whatever you decide, it needed to be a real decision. I sat with that for a moment. Send me everything. Already in your email. I drove home, read it again more slowly at my kitchen table. Every page, every fabricated message, every piece of the architecture Selene had constructed while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room learning how to hold someone else together. I thought about my father's voice. Your sister has been here. Every day. I thought about 5 years. I did not cry. What I felt was not grief in the immediate sense. It was colder than that. The total, the precise devastation of understanding, at last, the exact shape of what had been done to you. At midnight, I went to bed. In the morning, I put on my best suit and I drove to the hospital, because here is what Selene had never understood about me. I was not the person she had erased. I was the person who had built something from the erasure, and I was done being quiet about it. My parents were in the corridor when I arrived. My mother saw me first. She made a sound, not quite a word, something more broken than that, and stepped toward me. Alina. Not yet, I said quietly. Let me see her first. My mother stopped. My father stood with the rigid posture of a man who would not allow himself to appear diminished, which meant he was completely diminished and knew it. I looked at him, directly. Something I could not have done 5 years ago. He looked back, and something moved behind his eyes. Not quite an apology, not quite an explanation, something that sat in the ruins of both. I turned to the door. Through the window, Selena was smaller than I remembered, her dark hair loose against the pillow, the machines beside her beeping with steady indifference, the IV line running from the back of her hand. She looked fragile. Good, said a part of me I'm not proud of. She should know what fragile feels like. I pushed the door open. She heard me, turned, and something crossed her face that I had never seen on her before, something unmanaged, unperformed, stripped of every layer of strategy she had ever operated behind. Alina. Selene. I sat in the chair beside her bed, did not take her hand, or set my bag on my lap and looked at her with the full, steady weight of someone who is no longer afraid of what they know. Before we discuss a single thing about your situation, I said, I need you to do something. She waited. I need you to look at me, I said, and tell me you know what you did. The silence lasted long enough that I could hear the hum of the machines, the distant sound of the corridor outside. Then, quietly, with nothing performed in it. I know what I did, she said. Say it. Alina. Say it, out loud, in this room. Her jaw tightened. Something moved through her eyes. And then, in the voice of someone who has run out of exits, I lied to them. I made them believe things that weren't true. She stopped. Her hand gripped the blanket. Now I made them cut you off. The room was very quiet. Yes, I said. You did. I let it sit there between us for a moment. I wanted her to feel the full weight of it. Not because I was cruel, but because I had felt it for 5 years, and it deserved a moment of being acknowledged. Then I opened my bag. Now, tell me everything about the audit. I had to go to my parents' house for documents. I had told myself it would be businesslike, professional. I had done harder things than walk through a familiar door. I was wrong about how it would feel. The smell hit me first. That specific combination of wood polish and my mother's cooking and something underneath it that was just home, in the biological sense. the sense that bypasses everything intelligent you've built about yourself. And my mother was in the hallway before I'd closed the door. "I didn't know," she said, immediately, as if she'd been holding it since I'd arrived at the hospital and couldn't hold it a moment longer. "Alina, I didn't know. I believed her because she was there and you weren't. And I know that's not an excuse. I know, Mom. I should have called. I should have. The things she said you wrote, I should have asked you, Mom." My voice was steady, but it cost me something. "I know you didn't know. We'll talk about that, but I need the documents first. Can you let me work?" She pressed her hand over her mouth, nodded, stepped back. My father was in his study. He had the paperwork organized. I'll give him that. Victor Moreau's answer to emotional chaos was always logistical precision. He had everything laid out on the desk in the order I would need it. We worked in silence for 20 minutes. Then he said, without looking up, "You already knew. Evelyn told you." "Yes." "Everything?" "Everything." He set down his pen. And my father, the man who did not reconsider decisions, who had communicated love through pride rather than words my entire life, who had closed a door on me with a single phone call, sat back in his chair and looked like what he was, an old man who had made an enormous mistake. "I failed you," he said. 3 words, Victor Moreau, who used language like a controlled substance. "Yes," I said, "you did. I believed. I know what you believed, and I know why. And then at some point, we'll have a conversation about what it means that you were willing to believe it." I kept my voice even. "But that conversation is not today. Today, I need these documents." He nodded. We went back to work. At the door, as I was leaving, he said my name. I turned. "Thank you," he said. "For coming, for..." He stopped. Started again. "I don't deserve it." "No," I said simply, "you don't. But I'm not here because of what anyone deserves." I left before he could respond. It was 2 days before the resolution meeting when she tried it. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were all there. The way she'd been building warmth in our sessions, the careful softening of her usual edges, the specific attentiveness of someone who is preparing to make a pitch. When we were going through the final documents when she shifted the conversation, "I've been thinking," she said, "about what comes after. If this works, and it will, because you're the best, I want us to actually rebuild. I want us to be sisters again." I kept my eyes on the papers. "I know I can't ask for forgiveness immediately," she continued, "but I was thinking, your firm is expanding. I know corporate finance. My connections could be useful." A pause. "We could work together, like we should have been doing all along." I looked up. She was watching me with the warmth dialed up and the eyes soft. The performance I now recognize the way you recognize the weather patterns of a place you've lived long enough to know. "That's the angle?" I said. Her expression flickered. "Oh, I'm not..." "Celine." I set down my pen. "I've spent 2 weeks watching you. The warmth when you need something. The softening when a direct approach isn't landing. The pivot to shared benefit when sympathy doesn't work." I held her gaze. "I see it. I've always seen it. I just spent years not trusting what I saw. I'm trying to make things right, then try differently." My voice was not unkind, but it was not soft either. "Because what you just did, finding the angle, offering something I might want, wrapping it in the language of sisterhood, that is exactly what you have always done, and I am not available for it anymore. You owe this family. Don't." The word landed like a door closing. She went silent. "You owe this family everything," she said, quieter. The last card, on the one she'd been holding. "No," I said. "I owe myself everything. I spent 5 years building a life from nothing. No safety net, no family, no one to call when things went wrong. Everything I have, I made, alone." I let that sit for a moment. "So if you want to talk about what is owed in this room, Be very careful about that argument." Celine looked at me for a long time, the calculations running, the angles being assessed. And then, slowly, something collapsed in her face, not dramatically, not in the cinematic way of a person having a revelation, something smaller and for that reason more real. "I'm scared," she said. Just that. I looked at her. "I know," I said. "I'm going to help you anyway. Not because of what you deserve, because of what I can live with." I picked up my pen. "Now, let's finish this." The resolution meeting was a Friday morning, 14th floor, a room full of people who had spent weeks building a case for maximum damage. I walked in and I took it apart. This is what I do. I find the fracture lines before they open. I stand in rooms full of people in crisis and remain, myself, completely still. I present truth in the specific shape that allows people to move forward rather than simply burn. I did it for Celine the way I would have done it for any client, thoroughly, without sentiment, without letting a single thing in that room know that the woman I was defending had once carefully, deliberately dismantled my life. The irregularities were the result of inherited practices and oversight failures. True. The cooperation with the investigation was complete. True. And the reforms already being implemented were substantial. True. She received a formal censure, a financial penalty, a compliance period. She did not go to prison. She was not publicly destroyed. When it was over and we were in the corridor and my parents were hovering nearby, she turned to me. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "No," I agreed. "Why did you?" I looked at her. My sister, smaller than I remembered, stripped of the performance, looking at me with the unmanaged face of someone who genuinely doesn't know the answer. "Because I'm not you," I said, simply. She flinched. "Alina, I have a therapist," she said abruptly. "I started 3 weeks ago, before you came. I needed you to know that." I looked at her for a moment. "Good," I said, and I meant it. My mother cooked that evening, and the meal she made for things that mattered, the one I had grown up knowing as the shape of important occasions. The table was set too carefully, the candles too formal, my parents trying too hard in the way of people who are terrified of getting it wrong. We sat down. My father poured wine. We looked at each other across the things we hadn't said. My father spoke first. "I failed you," he said, "not just in believing her, in everything before that, in being the kind of man who could be worked on by something like that." He stopped. "I was not paying the right kind of attention to you for a long time." My mother was crying, silently, the restrained version of her grief, which meant it was the deepest kind. "I'm not going to disappear," I said. "I never disappeared. I was removed, and there's a difference." I looked at them both. "Well, but I can't come back to what this was. I can only come forward to something new. That takes time. It takes honesty. And there will be days when I need space, and I need you to give it to me without interpreting it as abandonment." "Anything," my mother said. "Not anything. Specifically that." My father nodded. We ate. It was not healed. It was the first meal of something that would take years, if it was built at all. But it was honest, and I had learned, in 5 years of building a life without them, to take honest, over-comfortable every time. Marcus was ruining a canvas when I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. The full quality of his attention, no performance, no filler. When I finished, he set down his brush. "How are you?" I thought about it, honestly. "I called Celine last week," I said. "We talked for 20 minutes. It was careful, on both sides, but it was real." "And your parents?" "We have dinner every few weeks. It's slow. There are still moments where I feel the shape of what happened and have to breathe through it." I paused. "But my father asked me about a case last time. My work, asked questions, listened to the answers." I looked at Marcus. "He's never done that before. Not really." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Is it enough? For now. I looked at the canvas he'd destroyed. You know what I keep thinking about? I spent 5 years being angry that a door had been closed on me. Then I found out someone had locked it deliberately, and I was angry about that. Bigger, hotter, the right kind of anger. And then I went back. I sat in that hospital. I stood in that boardroom. I had dinner at that table. And I realized the anger was never the thing keeping me going. I looked at him. The building was. Every piece of the life I made in those 5 years, I made it because there was nothing behind me, no safety net, no fallback, and I thought that was the tragedy. But it was the point. The realization had settled in me quietly, the way true things do. The distance made me someone who could walk back into that house and not need anything from them, not their approval, not even their love in the immediate sense. I could give from fullness instead of from need. That's not nothing, Marcus said. No, I said. It's not nothing. It's everything. We sat in the easy silence of people who have known each other long enough that silence is its own conversation. Outside, the city moved through its evening without interest in us, and I sat with the life I had built, piece by careful piece from the rubble of what had been taken, and I felt for the first time in a long time the full, uncomplicated weight of it. Mine. All of it. Every hard-won piece. If you like this story, please support us by subscribing and liking, and kindly drop a comment on the location from where you're watching. Thank you.